Salofalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuki. Coming up.
Quite a significant earthquake happening as we speak. It is quite a big one actually, this one.
The search continues for survivors in Vanuatu. Also,
this is the legacy of an ongoing system of cruelty.
Australia puts in new measures for refugees in PNG, and hundreds of Samoans apply for New Zealand citizenship. The desperate search for survivors continues after yesterday's 7.3 magnitude earthquake, which toppled buildings and brought a huge landslip down on a busy road. At least 14 people were killed and hundreds injured in the violent quake, and it's feared people are still trapped beneath the rubble and dirt. The government has issued a call for help, asking for medical supplies, heavy machinery for cleaning landslides and collapsed buildings, and safe drinking water. New Zealand Fire and Emergency is sending 34 search and rescue staff to Vanuatu to help in the search for survivors. Caleb Fotheringham has been covering the story.
With temperatures topping 30 degrees the day after the devastating earthquake, UNICEF Vanuatu Field Officer Chief Eric Tupea says access to safe drinking water is a growing concern, particularly for children.
The problem with the children is the issue of water also. What we start to notice from this morning, it's an increase of case of diarrhea, and that's a sign that people are not having access to drinkable water, and children particularly. That's very worrying.
UNICEF has so far managed to supply the local hospital with first aid kits and tents. Eric Dupere says he does not know how many of the injured are children. Multiple people have been killed and injured as a result of the quake, with fears the death toll could continue to rise as more people are believed to be buried in rubble. There's been little respite either. The Vanuatu Meteorology and Geohazards Department says aftershocks ranging from 2 to 5.9 magnitude have been occurring since midnight local time and are still ongoing. Vanuatu Business Resilience Council Chair Glenn Craig was talking to RNZ when a large aftershock struck on Wednesday morning.
We've requested search and rescue personnel. There's another quite a significant earthquake happening as we speak. It is quite a big one actually, this one.
Are you somewhere safe?
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I am. I'm out in the open. No, that's gone. That one's gone. Sorry about that.
World Vision's Clement Chipokolo says the aftershocks are compounding the problem.
We're still out of electricity as a city. We are out of water as well. And most of the stores are closed, and we have queues that are forming up in the stores that are open for people to get essentials, especially water. That really makes things really vulnerable.
Save the Children's Acting Country Director Lavinia Mahit, who is also in Port Vila, says police are patrolling the city to maintain order.
It's not to the point where it's too chaotic, but you can see the queues at the shops where people have to line up, and then the queues at the fuel station. So it's definitely building, but it's not where we've lost control. No, and I think people will try and keep things peaceful, calm and quiet.
Vanuatu is frequently battered by natural disasters and was last year hit by 3 severe tropical cyclones. Ms. Mahit says this is different because unlike a cyclone, there was no warning.
And then we have the cyclone pass through over. So there's that time delay where people can prepare, people can get the necessary needs and have plans in place, whereas a huge contrast and difference for this earthquake yesterday. No one knew it was coming. It came when it came.
International support is due to begin arriving today, with New Zealand and Australia sending search and rescue staff, medical teams and heavy machinery.
Indonesia's new president, Prabowo Subianto, has revealed plans to pardon as many as 44,000 convicts, about a third of the country's prison population. It's been cast as a human rights gesture, but given Prabowo's own record on human rights, it may be a tough sell. The West Papua Independence Advocates, the United Liberation Movement for West Papua, or ULMWP, says despite a few West Papua activists said to be freed, it's an attempt by Jakarta to disguise their more aggressive approach in West Papua. The ULMWP says thousands of West Papuans are being forced to flee into the bush by the sudden arrival of Indonesian soldiers into their villages. Don Wiseman spoke to former New Zealand MP Catherine Delahunty, a long-time advocate for the Indigenous people of the region.
What we know is from a range of sources, and it's very hard to get figures and numbers on these things, but I think we have every reason to be deeply concerned that under this new president, with his track record, things cannot be getting better. And if you look at a number of issues, including the one that United Liberation Movement have raised around transmigration resumption, which is incredibly serious given that the majority of the urban population in West Papua is already basically from Indonesia and not West Papuan. It has huge impacts in the urban areas, but also in rural areas where the food projects have been undertaken. There's some very serious situations. So we know that transmigration is being increased. We know that military have recently sent in 5 battalions to basically police the food projects in Moroke, which are basically evicting people from their homes and turning their forests into sugarcane and palm oil plantations to benefit Indonesia. There's human rights abuses have increased and there's no indication, given the people that Prabowo has appointed to have jurisdiction in the Indonesian government, many of them whose track records are also dodgy. It's a very concerning situation. From trying to redeem Suharto's reputation till now, there's a trail of blood which this country, West Papua, there's very little hope at the moment. And I think that's terrible in a human rights sense, but also with all the other issues. It's a very serious situation, which I just wish our government would actually take seriously and do something, stand up and support our neighbours who are suffering this increased colonisation process.
Well, the new president has freed a number of prisoners, hasn't he? And the ULMWP says this is a smokescreen.
I think freeing prisoners at Christmas, it's always good when political prisoners are freed, especially West Papuan. But it's very hard to get too excited given what's really going on and given that the public relations associated with freeing prisoners may make him look better. But there are no other reasons to feel that they're heading in the right direction under his leadership. The conditions on the ground continue to be dire in terms of both hunger and dislocation of peoples, more than 80,000 people. And again, figures are hard to finalise, in this year and in these recent months. And it's not enough to talk about freeing prisoners at Christmas. What is needed is to actually enter dialogue with West Papua and seriously consider their independence, seriously consider a referendum on their self-determination. And I'm not at all surprised things have got worse given who has been elected president of Indonesia. But what really concerns me is the lack of interest from our government and other governments in the region in terms of actually supporting, the cry for freedom that is increasingly being suppressed and abused in West Papua.
The Australian government has introduced new measures for refugees in Papua New Guinea that detractors have labelled a death sentence. Canberra has struck a deal with Port Moresby which effectively strips the capital's asylum seekers of free housing, food and healthcare. The refugees were forced into offshore detention centres by Australia more than 10 years ago. Margot Staunton has more.
Australia's Green Party claims the government has come up with a pact which will force 60 refugees in Port Moresby to live in poverty. A fact sheet from PNG's Immigration and Citizenship Service Authority says refugees are now going to receive a weekly cost of living allowance of 900 kina, the equivalent of 385 New Zealand dollars or 222 American dollars. Those with families could receive additional support, and lump sum payments are available for training or case resolution purposes. However, refugees could face eviction from their homes mid-January, and Mr Shoebridge says many are too ill to seek work in a city where there is already 90% unemployment.
This is some of the worst government policy playing out. This is the legacy of an ongoing system of cruelty towards refugees by the Australian government. For many people, so this is just miles away. It's someone else's problem.
The Australian government has previously stated that it has no responsibility for the refugees who were initially sent to PNG's Manus Island in 2013. In April 2016, PNG's Supreme Court ruled that the detention of refugees on the island was illegal and breached the country's constitution. The refugees were later moved to Port Moresby. Mr Shoebridge met the predominantly Middle Eastern refugees in Port Moresby recently, many of whom were mentally or chronically ill.
You can't go and see see it and not want to fix it. It's an appalling abuse by the Australian government. And to throw it all on the Papua New Guinea government is really part of a very colonial mindset.
The Refugee Action Coalition says the deal reflects Australia's ongoing abandonment of asylum seekers. Its spokesperson Ian Rintoul says neither Australia or PNG accept responsibility for their welfare.
It's a really disgraceful form of people trafficking. So they're concerned to wash their hands completely, and that's what the latest deal is about as well. Our concern is that it would remove overall responsibility for the health and welfare accommodation of people that Australia sent there in 2013, but are now the PNG government's responsibility.
Mr Rintoul says there is no future for refugees in PNG and no political will in Australia to settle them elsewhere.
I mean, the PNG government and the departments associated will keep taking money from Australia, right? They don't care about the level of services that are actually provided. Australia will keep throwing money at it to try and keep refugees out of Australia. For them, they see it as a cheap way of buying votes.
Faisal Wenzini, a 50-year-old Muslim refugee from Cairo, Egypt, has been carjacked, beaten and robbed during his 11 years in PNG. He told RNZ Pacific he barely sleeps and spends most of his time alone in his bedroom.
Stuck in Papua New Guinea, you understand? Very bad, not safe, not any target for anything. Don't have any target here.
He has two daughters, aged 3 and 5, who live elsewhere with their mother. He dreams of taking the girls to New Zealand and working in sales.
I want to start a new life. Just if I fly to New Zealand, I want to I work in my job.
Meanwhile, he collects cartons of drinks supplied at his lodgings and sells them for around 120 kina or 50 New Zealand dollars a week. RNZ Pacific has reached out to Australian Home Affairs and Immigration Minister Tony Burke several times for comment.
Hundreds of applications have come through from Samoans born between 1924 and 1949 seeking New Zealand citizenship following the passing of the bill back in October. Joining me is our reporter Grace Fevai, who's been covering the story. Talofa lava, Grace, it's been a while since we've followed up on the New Zealand citizenship bill that was passed a couple of months ago. What's the latest?
Talofa lava, Susana. New Zealand's Parliament passed the third and final reading with unanimous support for the Citizenship Western Samoa Restoration Amendment Bill last month. The bill now helps to actually restore a pathway to citizenship for those 3,500 Samoans whose citizenship was stripped away in 1982. Now, Maria Robertson, the Deputy Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs, confirmed that 49 applications have been approved, and those applications have received or are in the process of receiving a full refund of the application fee.
Do you know the total amount of number of applications so far?
Yes, so to date, 154 applications have been received, and of which 71 are from Samoa. The department expects to receive 110 more applications from the New Zealand High Commission in Samoa this week, but 49 applications have been approved, and those applications have received or are in the process of receiving a full refund. Robertson also said that one application has been declined, and over 500 people have come to the office since November the 26th. Also, they've received 777 calls to date. 2,900 application forms were also downloaded. So these are all the latest stats from Robertson.
There were divided opinions and calls for inclusion for this bill. Is that still the case?
That's a good question. And when I spoke to Anai on the day of the citizenship bill being passed in Parliament, he did say that he was happy it had been passed and that those descendants of those who are affected, could take it up upon themselves actually to carry on this legacy and try and get the bill to be amended. So a lot of other descendants have just gotten on with it and applied, and others who are descendants are already citizens themselves. But that's a good question. It'll be interesting to see in the next coming few months, even years, whether or not the bill will be amended to include descendants.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.